Good evening, my friends. Today I have a guest from the US. Her name is Mary Debono, and Mary Debono is working with Feldenkrais. She's a Feldenkrais instructor, and we talked a little bit before we recorded the podcast. She is also very curious and never stops learning. She was breaking the ground for transferring the Feldenkrais method to our horses and what Feldenkrais is and what makes her work so special and particular. That is what we will talk about tonight. Mary, welcome to the podcast. It's an honor to have you here.
Oh, thank you so much, Celina. It's an honor to be here. Really appreciate it.
I'm really looking forward to this conversation with you because actually, I don't know you personally. You are one of the few podcast guests that I'm having that I haven't met personally or have not been working with before. But we have a shared friend who said that the two of us, we need to get a date because what we are doing is adding, is adding each other so much. And that is a really, that made me really curious. And I looked a little bit into your biography and your webpage and thought, wow, that sounds great.
Oh, thank you. And I appreciate that friend, by the way. She's awesome. And I think she's right. This was important for us to meet.
Yeah.
I love what you're doing as well. So super excited to be here and to share with your audience as well.
You're from Australia, is that right?
No, I'm actually from New York.
You're from New York.
I'm from New York.
Oh,
yes,
I thought because
yes.
Yanni is from Australia.
No. No, I met Yanni. I've never met her in person. I've only met her online. I feel like she's, that I have met her in person, but no, we just with the power of Zoom, it's amazing. How you can get to know someone.
Isn't it cool? I mean, I don't know how it was for you, but for me, it was due to Corona that a lot of space was opening up, and suddenly I'm teaching all over the world.
I know it really there was a silver lining. I mean, there was obviously a lot of tragedy, and I don't mean to reduce that,
No.
minimize that, of course. But it opened up for so many people. So, and I want to be clear too, I'm originally from New York, but I live in Southern California right now. I have for the, so I'm no longer in New York. I gave that up like 30 something years ago. So it's really into the nice weather here. But with me, I had a very active in-person practice. And then with the pandemic and everything shut down, I was doing some online before that. I actually had been doing some online for a few years, but just a small bit of my practice. And then when the pandemic shut everything down, I went just full on online. And it's really been wonderful. I work with people all over the world, including Yanni in Australia and others from Australia as well. Yep.
It's the same for me. I've been offering online lessons since forever, basically. But the market amount was so small, people were not really daring to. And then suddenly with the pandemic, it was just like, ooh, exploding.
Yeah, it's really cool. Yeah, it's wonderful. Now we have access to teachers like you that you're in Norway and just all over. It's wonderful.
And like you. And that is what we want to talk about tonight, because you're a Feldenkrais student.
I'm a Feldenkrais teacher. Yes. Exactly. I have been for, let's see, I started the Feldenkrais training over 30 years ago.
Do I remember correctly that you have still trained with him personally?
No, I trained with people trained by him. Moshe Feldenkrais passed away in 1984. So I did not have the honor of meeting him. I was alive in 1984, but I did not have the honor. I didn't know about Feldenkrais yet. It was a few years later that I learned about Feldenkrais. It was after Moshe's death.
It's unbelievable. I just, when you said 30 years ago, I said, yeah, then he was still alive. But I'm just born end of 81. Just, oh God. But I think this is amazing. I really like Feldenkrais work. I never, had the possibility of really diving deep there, but each time I'm meeting it, I think, wow, it's so fascinating. Um, Tell me a little bit about your journey. How did you get in contact with Feldenkrais? How did you starting being interested?
Well, it's such an interesting story, and it's a story I think that a lot of your audience can relate to because it involves a horse,
Oh,
right?
perfect.
Because you know how it is, right?
Yeah.
We do things for our horses that we wouldn't do for ourselves.
Mm.
So, just to give you a little background, so I was born loving horses, loving all animals really, but horses and dogs really strongly. And at the time I was living in New York City. I was a little kid. I grew up in New York City. And that seemed like such a far away world, but I was just like so intent on it. And over the years, as still a young person, we were able to get horses in our life, and my family bought horse property out on Long Island, and dream come true, dream come true.
Mm.
And so that was all wonderful. And then as I got older and I left school, so I was in my 20s, and I had a different horse, another horse out in New Jersey, actually, because my company had moved there. I was working, by the way, I used to work as an IT professional. So I used to design computer systems. So a little bit different than what I do now.
Little.
And so this horse, he was a wonderful horse named of Toby. He was a thoroughbred. And he had a lot of behavioral and physical issues. And I was always searching, like looking for some ways to help him. And in the meantime, myself, I had a whole slew of physical issues myself. Okay. So you would think I was healthy. I looked fit. I was always out riding my horse and doing things. During the day, I was working at my computer job. But I had very severe bilateral carpal tunnel syndrome that was so severe that the doctors said I lost a tremendous amount of nerve functioning because it was so bad. I was in constant pain for years. I ended up having surgery on one arm. They were going to do one at a time. Made it, in my case, much worse. So that's that background. So I was always in pain. My arms would go numb constantly. I had all this going on. A well-known surgeon said that I needed to have steroid injections in my neck, 5 additional surgeries on the arm they already did surgery on. I also, another layer was I started having a hip problem when I was 18 years old, and it was really painful. And I was told I would probably need a prosthetic hip by the time I was 35 and all these things. And I had, back pain and neck issues. And I actually, even in my 20s, at one point, I remember thinking, well, I kind of have to expect this. I'm getting older.
So,
which is
so wait, you were not even 30 at that point.
I know.
Wow.
And it's funny how common that expression is, because I've heard it from so many people in their 20s and in their 30s, even from physicians in their 30s. I have heard this from. It's just people just expect to feel this way. And so that was always running in the background. And because of the stuff, I was doing physical therapy and chiropractic and even acupuncture, all that stuff. In my case, it wasn't helping. So fast forward, okay, I'm with my horse. I really am trying to help my horse. And I saw a notice for this thing called the Feldenkrais method. I had no idea what it was. No idea. And it was for people. It was clearly for people. But I thought, I'm just going to call and find out what that is. Because it talked about, improving movement and well-being. But again, I'm thinking my horse. I'm not thinking anything about myself. So I call, and this is back in the day when you didn't go online because there was no online. So I called the 800 number, toll-free number, and they sent me something in the mail. So back in the day, you actually got things in the mail.
We have an intern here. She's 18.
She'd never seen mail.
She has never seen it like this before. So we very regularly have this culture clash in the kitchen when we are talking about things. And she's just saying, okay, what are you talking about?
Isn't it funny? It's really funny.
Yes, it is.
But so I think back to those times, and you have to wait for things, right? It's not like right now you'd just Google something and you'd get all the answers. So, but I remember they sent me information, and there was a Feldenkrais practitioner right in the same town I was in. At the time, I was living in Princeton, New Jersey, because that's where my company was located. And I thought, I'm just going to call him up. Just going to call him up. And I don't know what he said to me, Celina, but whatever it was, it hooked me in, and I immediately made an appointment. Immediately made an appointment with him. And all I could, so it was really interesting because he wasn't a horse person at all. He wasn't any kind of an animal person. Lovely man, Lawrence Phillips. And but when he started working with me, doing very gentle movements, and I did tell him about my carpal tunnel and my hip and yada yada. But my first thought was, I felt a change immediately, and my thought was, I have to take this to the animals. I have to take this to the animals.
Wow.
So right from the get-go, when I felt the power of the changes that can be obtained by this gentle, non-habitual movement, I knew that I wanted to share it not only with my own horse, but everyone's horses, dogs, cats, anyone who has a nervous system can benefit from it. So that was really my motivation. So I went to Lawrence. I did a number of sessions with him very regularly, completely changed my life, completely. And it wasn't a miracle. I don't want to say that in one session or a week of sessions, all my pain went away. No, it took some time, but I could feel the difference right away. And I knew I was onto something. And I ended up having no more issues with my carpal tunnel. All my strength returned, even more so than before, right? So all my nerve functioning came back. My hip pain disappeared completely, something that had been plaguing me for many years as well, right? No more back pain, no more neck pain. I just had a whole different sense of myself, Celina. And this is what I want to emphasize. It's yes, it's a physical change. I could ride my horse in balance. By the way, before that, I was very lopsided on my horse. I didn't look that bad if you saw me, but I had probably 70% easily of my weight in my left seat bone.
Wow. That's a lot.
Yes.
So the right canter wasn't going so well, or?
Exactly. I wonder why. But the thing is, it was so familiar that it didn't feel off. And because I had learned to keep myself looking straight, it wasn't evidence to a trainer. It wasn't evident. So it wasn't obvious. So it was so interesting how so many things with my riding totally changed. And my horse, anyway, over time, I obviously had different horses in my life because they passed away and things like that. My horse, horses that couldn't do certain movements suddenly became able to do them, right? Because it wasn't
interesting,
right?
Yeah. Magic.
Magic, total magic. Must have been something in the feed. I don't know.
Definitely,
but so it was so apparent to me how important it is that we have to address ourselves to help our horses. And I do both. I help the horses directly and I help the humans directly, right? Because they're both so interrelated, right? But that's how I got into it. And what I ended up doing, I had this very successful computer career, right? I was, being promoted, making good money, all this stuff. I completely left it because this was my passion. It was my passion to help, animals and their people. And that was something that was my passion since I was a very, very young child. And it was now the Feldenkrais method gave me a real opportunity to go after that, to actually, to bring that to fruition. And I've been doing it ever since. And it's just been amazing. Been really grateful. Yeah.
That sounds really, really great. And I guess, I have been studying other topics like osteopathy and craniosacral and stuff. And I don't know, but I would expect it was probably the same for you. The moment you are taking the first step into this brand new world, you're also getting so curious.
Yes,
So many doors are opening.
absolutely. Yeah. And like you, I also studied other things,
Mhm,
and that contributed to, informed my work.
mhm.
And there's so many wonderful different modalities out there. And it's just, but it opens up a door and you realize, and there's something actually that in the Feldenkrais method, we call biological optimism. So
Okay,
it's this, isn't that a great term?
that's a fantastic term. What does that
Yes,
mean?
yes. And I think it was Ruthie Alon, who was a amazing Feldenkrais trainer. She passed away now. She was in her 90s. Amazing woman. She trained directly with Dr. Feldenkrais. I think she coined the term, but basically it means that you embody this sense of hope. In other words, you realize you have the power to change the trajectory of your life. And isn't that wonderful? Isn't
That
that just a
is
beautiful thing?
that is fantastic.
And I would say that when you learn this work, and I teach it so that I teach people hands-on work that they don't have to be
Mhm,
Feldenkrais practitioners,
mhm.
but they can take a lot of the concepts and principles from it and apply it to their horses. They also learn the skills to not only help themselves, but to be empowered to help their horses too, very directly. So it's that biological optimism that you realize, oh, I can do something about this. If my horse is having issues with a particular movement or has a, stiffness in the back or, whatever the
Mhm.
issue is, and maybe it's something more behavioral, maybe emotional, you have tools to empower you to change that, to improve that. And I think that's so amazing. I mean, it completely changed my outlook on life. You know, I, I thought I was going to be stuck with this really bad hip and have to go through all, and have these difficulties through life and live with pain and dysfunction in my arms and things like that. And I realized I didn't have to, right? That I was able to have the skills to change my own life.
That is fantastic.
Yeah. And so
I mean,
that's what, yeah. So
it's
that's,
fantastic for you as
yes,
a person, but even
absolutely.
but even more fantastic that you can pass on the knowledge and multiply this outcome for many people out there and many animals out there.
Yes. And that's why I'm on a mission, because I'm so grateful. Rarely does a day go by that I don't say, thank you, Moshe Feldenkrais, the
Mhm.
originator of this beautiful work. Because, and a lot of my students and clients will say that too, thank you, Moshe, because it is such an amazing body of work. And that's why I'm on such a mission to share it, because I know what it's done for me and for my clients and students over the years. And it's like, I want everyone to know about it because it can reduce, basically, the bottom line is it can reduce suffering and bring more joy and well being into the world for every kind of creature.
And how does that work? Can I am familiar with Feldenkrais work, but I'm pretty sure there's many people out there who have maybe heard the term or maybe not, and who can't make sense out of what we are saying. It sounds a bit wooza if you have never
Yes,
done it before.
right. And I want to be clear because um, sometimes the name people don't understand. They think that it's some kind of like religion or something. They think
Mhm.
it's Feldenkrais. It's not. It's
Okay.
Feldenkrais is a man's name, was a man's name. It was Dr. Moshe Feldenkrais. And so the method was named after him. He originated it. So I just want to be clear about that. So it has nothing to do with religion of any kind. It's a method of improving one's movement and well-being. And what we do is, so I'll talk about it when you're doing it with humans first.
Mhm.
When you're doing it with humans, and I'm going to say adult humans, we can talk, right? I can verbally guide you. I can verbally take you through a series of very particular movement sequences and direct your attention to specific things. And what happens when I do that is your brain starts to experience these novel movements. You pay attention in a different way to novelty than you do to familiar movements. Okay. And so your nervous system kind of lights up, it wakes up, if you will, and you become more aware of habits that you have. So I said earlier that I used to sit very heavily on my left seat bone. That is extremely common. I'm going to say almost everybody sits heavier on one seat bone than the other, unless they're really aware of it. Sometimes it's a very minor difference. Many times it's a big difference. And it can create all kinds of problems physically for you, as well as if you're a rider, and I'm guessing you, if you're listening to this, you are, it creates all kinds of trouble for your horse, all kinds of trouble for your riding, and for your horse's health as well. So those are things that suddenly you become aware of, because it's like you're learning how to reduce your sense of effort and improve your awareness, your feel. So you do that again through these very, very specific movement sequences that are gentle. And there's an emphasis on the gentleness because we want it to feel easy for you. And if a movement or position does not feel easy, we break it down, we modify it so it does feel easy. And then your brain says, oh, I like that. I like that. I want to do more of that. And then you can expand on that. So it's not that you live your life doing only easy things, but your foundation is built on a sense of ease and pleasure of movement, because that's what we want our brain to associate with. That sense of ease and pleasure and effortlessness in our movement. So again, we do this in various ways in the Feldenkrais method. One is verbal, and that's what I do online. Okay, I'm guiding people verbally, and it's amazingly successful. And there's very specific movement lessons. You can call them gentle awareness exercises, but we prefer to call them awareness through movement lessons, or ATMs. But then if you're working with, in person with somebody, there's a hands-on method where the practitioner will use his or her hands to guide the person through different movements. So moving the arm in a specific way, relating it to how the spine and ribs move. Yeah. Again, using novelty, non-habitual movements, non-habitual sensations. And what that does, Celina, is it actually creates a change in the entire nervous system. So it's not only about improving this particular movement, maybe a movement of the arm, for example, but it's creating a global change of state, which changes the way you feel about yourself. Again, it goes back to that optimism. And so you might think, well, okay, Mary, that's well and good for an adult human. What about a horse? How do we tell the horse? What about a horse? Right?
Yes.
Well, we use the same idea. So what I did, so just to backtrack a little bit, I was already doing hands-on work with horses for years before I started my Feldenkrais training. I just did a lot of things intuitively, and just from what I picked up, I was always very curious about movement and how we can help horses and other animals through using our hands. When I started the Feldenkrais training, everything I learned for people, because it's taught for people, it's not taught for horses or dogs or cats. I translated. I had a notebook that translated everything. Okay, if I can do that with a person lying on a table on their side, what would be the same outcome if I had a horse standing up? So, yeah. So, for example, if the teacher is showing me how to move the arm in a particular way, with a human, I'm thinking, okay, I can't do that exactly with the horse because they're not lying on their side, they're standing up. But how could I create the same conditions for the nervous system to want to change that? So maybe I move the ribs a little bit differently. Maybe I bring a different sense of movement to the sternum relative to the leg, all these different things. And I put the pieces together like that. So it's, so again, you use the same information base, you just have to modify it to do it with a horse who's mostly, I have worked with some horses lying down. Usually if they're lying down, they're either very ill or trained to lie down and be comfortable doing it.
Yeah, I
But
see.
most of the time we work with our horses standing up.
Mm-hmm.
And so I gauged, the work to that.
Mm-hmm.
But it's really amazing. So you use your hands in these particular ways that, again, wake up the nervous system and get all the different parts of the horse working more harmoniously, because that's the crux of it. The Feldenkrais method is really about helping you coordinate your movement better. And if I can bring it to the horses a little bit, maybe this might make sense to people. Especially if you're here, you're listening to this podcast, I'm going to guess that you want your horse to move well, right? And so there's a sense of rounding the back, engaging the hind legs, right? We talk about that a lot in this work. And people do all kinds of wonderful things in how they improve their riding to help the horse do that better.
Mm-hmm.
But a lot of times what happens if the horse has a bit of an issue with it, it's because they might be habitually stuck in certain places. And I have found over the years that working with the horse's sternum and ribs, which is often a very neglected part, can really help the horse like immediately improve the ability to round the back and engage the hind legs.
Oh,
so
yes.
again, yes, it's amazing. And the sternal work has to be done in a very particular, very gradual way. So the horse's nervous system accepts it and really likes it. Really likes it, because again, you want to associate the sense of ease and pleasure with the movement. So the horse's nervous system will want to repeat it.
Yeah. And
so that's something to do with, I'm sorry.
No. Just it's, we always have this little delay over the online work. No.
Yeah.
No, but that is, I really like that you're emphasizing the ease and the pleasure, because especially in the time where you were doing this and starting to develop it for horses, we and still today we very often hear this sentence or this guideline of no pain, no gain. And this is on the very opposite where I would like to work with my horses and with myself. And from my experience, it's so much richer to work with pleasure and ease and to become curious, to explore no movements. Yes. And we are doing something similar when we are doing, especially when I'm training the horses in groundwork, that when I have horses that for whatever reason, because they didn't grow up well, or because they were sick, or they were trained shabby or something, that I'm working with tiny movements and just a very, very little from the right hind foot, from the left hind foot, for giving them a good base and for making them start to explore the feel in their feet and to explore where do I feel safe also, where is it creating pleasure and ease in my body.
Yes, I'm so glad you said that, because I have always felt that good training, good dressage, which you don't always see good dressage, I'll be honest.
No.
I feel what that is just like the Feldenkrais method. I feel that dressage is basically like the Feldenkrais method for horses, in that as far as the sort of like the movement lessons I was talking about, right? And so then we add in the hands-on part, what I call Debono moves, right, to that. And it's basically the Feldenkrais method. So you've mentioned curiosity a couple of times, and I love that so much, because that is our greatest tool, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's, to be curious puts you in a whole different mindset, right? You're so much more open when you're curious. You're able to take in more sensory information. So you have what I call informed intuition. It feels like it's intuition, but you're getting information in, you're actually picking up little cues from your horse, and your horse is picking up cues from you. And you're using that to create a beautiful relationship, a beautiful movement with your horse. And so I even go a step further. I call it compassionate curiosity, because some people there, and I've been guilty of this too, that there's a lot of negative self-talk, right? We're judging
Mm,
ourselves,
mhm.
or maybe a person is judging their horse or other people's horses and all that. And instead, if you can have compassionate curiosity, it's like the curiosity without the judgment. It's just beautiful, pure curiosity. And I just think that's such an important thing. So the no pain, no gain. Oh man, we're talking the same language here. Because what we say in Feldenkrais a lot is no pain, more gain.
Yeah.
Because again, you want the nervous system on board. You want your brain to say, yes, more, please. Right.
Hmm.
The other thing that we make a distinction between, and I think this is really important for riders to think about, is in the Feldenkrais method, and at least in my teaching especially, I make a distinction between the sense of effort and the sense of strain. So strain to me, the way I'm using it is that's when you're using unnecessary effort. So you're maybe holding on to just these habitual muscular contractions, tension that you have, or the horse has. So the horses can do it as they have those bad habits too. So that, and what happens is when you have strain, you're fighting yourself all the time. It's like you have certain muscle groups pulling here and certain ones pulling here, and you're literally fighting yourself, or the horse is fighting him or herself, or you're fighting your horse. It's one or the other.
Yes.
That's strain, and that creates a lot of damage. That creates wear and tear damage, increases your risk of injury, causes all kinds of bad things, as well as it doesn't feel good. You don't have that joy, right? That lightness.
Yeah.
When you can have effort, and as long as it's appropriate effort, right? It's directed towards the intended action, we want that, right? But so in the Feldenkrais work, we're constantly asking you to reduce your sense of effort so you can get at the pure effort, so to speak, what's no longer strain, and your awareness is greatly enhanced. So your timing with your horse gets better, all those good things. You literally feel more when you reduce your effort. So the no pain, no gain, and just like pushing through and, working through it, that doesn't appeal to me. And I would say it doesn't appeal to most horses. And I have worked with a lot of horses over the past 30 plus years, other people's horses. Obviously I worked with my own for years before that. And at the highest levels of competition. And I've felt what some of those horses suffer from being forced to go through the pain and working with a sense of strain rather than a sense of effortlessness. It doesn't mean there's no effort, but it's a sense of effortlessness, right? Because you've gotten rid of the strain.
Yeah, I guess also most of us will have experienced that in one or the other form in our life. So I hope at least that all of us have been experiencing these moments of flow. That things
Yes.
are just,
Yes.
blending in and everything is getting so effortlessly. That doesn't mean that you don't get tired of it eventually, but it means that it's simply more fun and as you said, you want to repeat the thing that
Yes, that's a
doing.
great way of describing us, that sense of flow. Right. And so we know that calories are being used. Like, in other words, there is an effort there, but it's a sense of effortlessness. And you've seen this, I'm sure, like obviously in horses that are moving well and riders that are just harmonious with their horses. You see this maybe in beautiful figure skaters or dancers or whatever. There's that sense of effortlessness. They don't look like they're straining. Right. So it's really a beautiful thing.
And that is where what you're teaching is blending in so beautifully into my work, because what we are doing is we are teaching it first from the ground and doing groundwork and trying to train up the horses without the necessity of carrying a rider, so that they
Yes.
can focus on their own body. And the funny thing is actually that we found out we are creating a luxury problem there. So sometimes, or very often, we have then, or we get so good in groundwork. we are getting so good in building up the horse language and to really prepare the horses for carrying a rider and being aware of their point of weight and shift of movement and also the directions of movement. And then we're putting a rider on top. And then the rider has an untrained seat. And then
Yes.
the horses are starting to react, on the rider's untrained seat. And that is really, I would like to say it's a luxury problem if we're phrasing it positive, because the horses are getting so self-aware, so self-secure, so safe in what they are doing and how to balance themselves. That it's just starting to get obvious when the rider is not trained to find their balance point or something.
Boy, those horses are, first of all, I love the work you do, because you do help the horses really find themselves. Like I call connecting with themselves, right? Really feeling all those things. And what beautiful, incredible teachers then they become, because then they highlight, because most horses have put up with the unbalanced seat, or if it becomes habitual, right? They tune it out after a while, although they still suffer the consequences.
Yeah.
But there's some degree of tuning it out. So the fact that those horses know what it feels like to just be responsible for themselves is wonderful. And this is where then the rider needs the Feldenkrais lessons, right? Because
Exactly.
right, so that they can learn to be more, I'll tell you a funny story. So the horse I currently have now, his name is Breeze, and he was a what we call here a rescue horse. He had been saved from an abusive situation. He had a lot of abuse actually in his life. He was handed back and forth to different people, not back and forth from one person to another his whole life, because he was quote unquote difficult. And the first time I sat on him, he wasn't my horse at the time, and we were just in a round pen because he was supposedly so crazy. I was so amazed at how sensitive he was, because by now, of course, I had been doing Feldenkrais and my seat was very balanced, and I could take, put a few ounces more in this seat bone and a few more, and change it. And he would like spin based on tiny changes. And I was saying to the person who was currently owning him at that time, I said to her, "This horse is amazing. He's amazing." And she said, "No, he's not. He's horrible." She said, "He'll only turn in one direction. And meanwhile, he's doing whatever I'm asking." And what I discovered, because then I gave her Feldenkrais lessons, she was really heavy on her left seat bone. And so he was only spinning based on that. So it was interesting that she blamed it on, which is very common. I see this all the time in the work I do, that people blame the horse. They assume it's the horse's problem. The horse doesn't turn this way or doesn't pick up this particular lead or whatever. And instead, when you help the human learn how to be more balanced, more coordinated in their movements, more aware, right? Suddenly the horse gets better, like we talked about earlier. But that's a situation where that, Breeze he's a very sensitive horse. He still is, and he's 28 years old now. He reacts to small changes, right? He didn't tune it out. Excuse me. So I love that. Yeah. So
Take a sip of water. Take some water. Yeah. So I would say that he has not learned to go against.
Exactly. And so for you, for the way you teach the horses is so beautiful, because then it's incumbent on the rider to come to that level.
Yes, exactly.
Which is so wonderful.
And it's getting so interesting the recent years, or it feels like that in academic art of riding, we have this curiosity. And with each little puzzle piece that we are learning, the picture is changing a little. And the recent years we have been spending a lot with doing a bit of research more about the seat, and also the influence of the position of pubic bone and tailbone, how they are steering the rib cage in one or the other direction. And that is so fantastic, because we are on a lower and lower level of education of both horse and rider. We are able to to get free of the secondary aids.
Oh, how wonderful.
And that is
Yeah.
really nice.
Yes.
So just by,
Yes.
placing, you would probably say sternum work, but just by placing the rib cage in a certain direction, um, we can write all the laterals and all the exercises and all the collection, and it's getting so nice. And we just had this course last weekend or 2 weeks ago now. We were talking about over the back, and then we were joking that our horses are getting so light. And then Ben said, "Yeah, but it's helping if you don't ride them against your own aids at the start."
Oh, wow. 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 I have to say it's so encouraging to me to hear this, because the way I look at it, it's like you're bringing this, it's lightness, it's beauty, it's elegance, it's all those things, but it's ultimately it's kindness.
Well, that is nice. Thank you.
Yeah, and I so appreciate that. So I want to thank you for that, because I really got into this work because as even as a young child, I wanted the world to be kinder.
Mm.
You see so much, and I hate to say, you do see in the horse world a lot of times a lot of harsh aids, harsh training. And this idea of being so light that it's a thought that changes your horse is so amazing to me. It's so beautiful. And that's what I think it's so lovely to strive for, is for us to think about that. Like, how light can we be? Because horses are incredibly sensitive. Even the ones that people think are not, they can be so sensitive. And so, like, just like you see with your students and yourself, it's like small shifts are really felt by the horse. And when you keep it harmonious and you harmonize, I guess I should say, this is that horse human system that I talk about, that it's not a human over here and a horse over here. Even if you're on the ground, you do a lot of work on the ground too. Like you said, it's a horse human system. So when you come into that harmony, right, you create this beautiful system that you both are sensing each other and moving together and connecting with each other on such a level that the smallest thing, you can change direction, right? It's really beautiful. And I think ultimately, like I said, there's a joy, there's a beauty, there's a basic kindness in that. So I want to say something else about how what you're doing on the ground, because the fact that you start with the horse with nothing, no saddle, no rider, is really, really important. And that's how I start with my work as well, that the horse is just in a halter or nothing, maybe. But then, and just like you find when you do put the rider up, what I do as well, and I teach this to my students, is to gradually add pieces of tack. So even when you're doing the hands-on work with the horse, because if you think about it, so we all have habits of how we sit, how we stand, how we move, how we ride our horses. There's all kinds of habits. So in the Feldenkrais work, we're really addressing those habits and helping you get rid of them, because if they're no longer serving you, we don't want them, right? They're working against you. So what we do with the horses is we recognize that they have habits too. And I find such fascinating things. I remember working with this horse. He was a big warm blood. And the woman, she was a trainer, dressage trainer. And she told me, he gets really stiff, and he really, he goes against the right rein. And I said, okay. So I started working with him with nothing on him, just a halter and lead. She was holding him. And then I said, let's put his bridle on. And we had done this lovely work where he had gotten so loose in his body. We put his bridle on. Guess what happened?
He was biting you?
Well, he immediately you couldn't see it outwardly, but the movements didn't go through his body anymore. And nobody was doing anything except he was wearing the bridle. He was in a stall. He wasn't even in a grooming area he was in a stall, her and she put the bridle on, and he didn't pin his ears. He didn't do anything outwardly that showed any kind of resistance. but movements stopped going through the same way. They were no longer flowing through his body. So I said, okay, that's okay. And she was fascinated and she was curious. This is, my students are curious, right? I love it. So then we continued the session while he wore the bridle. Well, then he learned I don't need to be resistant to the bridle, right? I could wear it and the movements can go through. So that was great. Then she picked up the left rein. She wasn't on the horse. She just picked up the rein, held it a little bit on the left rein. He was fine. She picked up the right rein. He wasn't fine. It was so fascinating. So I'm like, this is great. Now we know this is wonderful. I love challenges, right? So then we worked with him through that. And then he realized, and so we did all kinds of different things. I had her holding, doing it in different ways as she would if she was on the horse. And he was fine then. Then we put his saddle pad on, right? Things changed again. Then we put the saddle. Things changed a little bit more, right? We had to keep addressing each layer. We put the girth on, but loosely. And when we tighten the girth, now things are different, right? So it's really important. And this often does not happen in one session. This can take many, many sessions, but working through, right, the different habits that they associate with different pieces of equipment or different areas. They might associate a certain movement habit in the arena that they don't have when they're in their stall, right? They don't, of course, right? They're just, even if you're standing loose in a halter in the arena, they might have a particular reaction. It's very interesting. So the more different environmental things we could bring in, the different variations we call it, the greater the learning, the greater the improvement for the horse and the human.
And then it's really important that the human is a part of it, because if the horse is, there's the reason why the horse has the resistance, right?
Exactly. And it may not even be to that human. It may have been to 3 humans before, maybe a trainer they worked with or a uneducated rider. But both of them have to be addressed, because again, we're working, and the way I say it is the way you breathe, the way you move, and even the way you think and direct your attention are all experienced by your horse, and they all affect the interaction between you and your horse. So something simple as you're breathing a certain way and your horse starts to think that maybe there's danger around, maybe they're right, or you're holding your breath, maybe that's a habit that person has, or the way they stand, all of these things are sensory information for the horse that the horse's brain is basically utilizing for better or for worse. So the more we can bring those things into our awareness, the more joyful our experiences will be with our horse, for both the horse and the human. That's why I think that's so important, that horse-human system. We're a system when we're with our horses.
And we can't emphasize that enough.
Right.
So if I want my students now to go and learn from you, where can I send them?
Oh, okay. I have my website is a simple name. It's my name. It's marydebono.com. But the thing I would recommend, Celina, is actually, I have what I call a rider masterclass. It's 3 short videos. They're like 15, 20 minutes each. You do them in a chair, but they're really effective Feldenkrais lessons. Yeah. And so you get 1 a day for 3 days, and they're totally free. So if they go to marydebono.com/rider, they can get them there. And then they'll be on my list. And so they'll hear about other things as well that I have. But that's a great way to get started, knowing a little bit more about this work.
Cool. So I will link that in the show notes.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate that.
I think I will start and sign up there after our conversation.
Oh,
I'm always so curious.
Great. Thank you. I appreciate it so much.
And then I'm looking forward to listening to your talk on the online summit. That's the next
Yes.
big project that happens. And you
Yes, I'm
have picked
excited. Thank you for that.
you have a great topic. I was very fond of your topic. Maybe you want to tell just a short, what are you talking about
Okay,
next?
yes. So the title of it is Improve Yourself, Improve Your Horse. And we're going to dive into, exactly how the Feldenkrais method helps both horse and rider. And we're going to go into more specific things and give your audience tools so they could actually go and use these tools to help improve themselves and their horses at the same time. So I'm really
Fantastic.
excited to share that with your audience. So
That would
thank
be
you for that.
wonderful. We have already the first 500 tickets are out.
Oh, it's
It will
so
become
great.
great. Yeah.
That is wonderful. Very
Mhm.
exciting. Very
Very
exciting.
exciting. Okay, Mary, thank you for tonight or for this morning.
Yeah, this morning here and night at your place.
My night
So
here.
I can't thank you enough. It's such a pleasure to talk with you and to share this with your audience. And I really appreciate the opportunity. So thank you, Celina. Thank you, everyone who's listening as well.
You're very welcome. I really enjoyed this conversation. And thank you to Yanni to Australia for
Yes,
setting
thank you,
us up.
Yanni. We love Yanni.
Yes, we love you. Exactly. Goodbye.
Okay, thank you so much. Bye bye.
Bye.